2020 on demand. This session was previously recorded for the NYLA 2020 virtual conference. It is available to you through December 31st, 2020. Please note, once viewed, each on-demand program is eligible for 1 continuing education credit. Links to materials and presenter contact information have been archived in a Google folder and are made available after conference. Support files and documents can be found in session files below the program description. Any questions about the NYLA 2020 virtual conference digital platform can be directed to Kristina@nyla.org, or you can call 800-252-6952. Building a Library of Things is sponsored by SMART and co-sponsored by PCRT, RAS, SCLA, LHRT, and NMN. Without further ado, our presenters.
Hello, my name is Steve Bachman. I am the conference curator for SMART, section for the Management of Information Resources and Technology. Thank you for joining us. It is my pleasure to present our presenters, Kristina, Ronald, and Heather Nelson from Guilderland Public Library, and Julie DeLaney from the Smithtown Library.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, my name is Kristina Ronald, and I'm the Collections and Digital Services Librarian at the Guilderland Public Library. I oversee collection development for our physical materials, digital materials, and our Library of Things.
Hi everyone, my name is Heather Nelson, and I work at the Guilderland Public Library in the Collection Services Department, and I'm responsible for the ordering, processing, and cataloging of material for the collection, and also managing acquisitions.
A little bit about the town of Guilderland. We are a suburban community located just outside of Albany with a population of approximately 35,000 and 15,600 library card holders. Our library sees a lot of use from the students and families in the Guilderland Central School District, senior citizens, and even some use from students at SUNY Albany and other local colleges. So now let's get into talking about our Library of Things.
So the idea of circulating non-traditional items started to gain popularity in the library community, and it was during this time when our library began to think about ways in which we could provide unique items to our patrons and what those items could be. So in 2015, our director got the staff together where he introduced this concept and had us collectively brainstorm on the kinds of items we could potentially add to our collection. From that meeting, we compiled everyone's suggestions and created a list of items, which gave us a good starting point for the collection and what it could look like in the future. So I would say if you have the opportunity to seek input from your staff, I think it's a good place to start. Everyone has unique interests and hobbies, so it's fun to see what people come up with. And then once you do that, I would check other Library of Things collections from other libraries just to see what's out there and to get some inspiration. Since then, we've grown our collection to offer over 40 different types of items, in addition to 100 board games and 50 kits. We try to offer a variety of items that will cater to different age groups. So for adults, we have folding tables and card code readers. For teens, we offer various video game controllers and instant cameras. And for kids, we have child-sized metal detectors and various storytime kits. And then, of course, we have items that appeal to a wider audience, and this includes our cake pans, our Wi-Fi hotspots, and ukuleles. With any new collection, in the beginning, you will be trying to figure out what your patrons like and what your community needs are. At our library, for instance, the GoPros and the Wi-Fi hotspots and folding tables have been extremely popular with our patrons. But surprisingly, our cake pans have not circulated very well. So sometimes you don't know how well something is going to do until you add it to the collection. So I'd say if you're just starting out, start with a few things and go from there. And then if a particular item becomes popular, you can always purchase more down the line. Whereas if something doesn't do as well, at least you don't have a ton of money invested into it.
Now I'm going to talk about how we select and acquire items for the Library of Things. The easiest thing to do is to start with some items that other libraries in our system were already trying out. So namely the folding tables, the fishing poles, and the Wi-Fi hotspots, all three of which we added to our initial collection. From there, we built the collection to respond to public requests, current events, and to be responsive to the community. The advice I would offer is to think about the things that are going on in your community that you can support with unique items, like maybe try before you buy items, learning tools, or items that people need for a special occasion but don't necessarily want to purchase for themselves. Next, how do we buy our items? Most items are purchased from Amazon, but there are some great programs and businesses out there that libraries can rely on as resources. For example, our Wi-Fi hotspots were bought at a discount from TechSoup, which is a discount electronics and computers website that works with educators and librarians. And our telescopes are also from a great company in Maine called Cornerstones of Science. Cornerstones understands the needs and challenges of public libraries and completely processes the telescopes for you, attaching all the components to the body so that they can't be lost, and that's for ease of patron use. So all you have to do is put a barcode on the telescope and it's ready to go. Now that we've got all this great stuff, how do we package the items? We need to package them in durable cases. Before we order any item, we try to anticipate any cases or extra pieces we'll need to circulate them successfully and to keep them intact. We're usually looking for clean and simple bags and cases, typically in black and with handles. We've used everything from pencil cases to a padded cooler to hold our library of things items, and we usually order those from Amazon. If the items are kind of techy, we like our cut the cord collection. Our IT department has been happy to find small and nondescript cases for us. So really anything that fits or anything that is the right size is game. We've even pulled out extra DVD cases to house our museum pass collection.
So one of the first challenges we encountered was how do we adhere a call number and a barcode to items that come in all different shapes and sizes. So to solve this problem, we decided to create a laminated tag that would attach to the bag or the case that the item is stored in. You can see from the photo that the tag has the call number, the barcode, and the name of the item on both sides. We decided to go in this direction because we knew these items were going to be shelved on the public floor, and we needed a way for patrons to be able to identify what was inside the case or the bag. In the early stages of the collection, we were using a thin laminate, and we quickly found that the tags were coming apart and had to be replaced after a couple of months. So using the thickest laminate you can find will help with durability and longevity. I will point out that there are some items in our collection that you physically cannot attach tags to. So these include our folding tables and our fishing poles. So for these items, we created a booklet of barcodes that our circulation staff uses to check these items in and out. So you may come across items in your collection that you will need to treat a little differently as well. In addition to the laminated tags, we also decided to create content sheets for items that come with a lot of parts and pieces. Having a content sheet lets the patron know what is included, and it also helps circulation staff keep track of the components when checking them in and out, in case a part goes missing. And keep in mind that this is the process that our library felt was best for us. However, each library has its own unique space, challenges, and budget. So what has worked for us may not work for your library. So I think the most important thing is to just be flexible and creative in the beginning, and eventually you'll come up with a system that works for your library. So now you might be wondering, how do we catalog these items? My advice is, when it comes to cataloging non-traditional items, try not to reinvent the wheel. Try to find an existing record if you can, that you can modify or use as a template. Oftentimes you can find records in OCLC, Z39.50, or even your library's local catalog. If cataloging non-traditional items is new to you, there are a lot of great resources online to help you catalog three-dimensional objects and kits. And I provide a couple that you can check out at the end of the presentation. Shoot. So this is a screenshot of a GoPro record, so you can get an idea of what a typical Library of Things marked record looks like. The highlighted fields are the ones that you most likely will be modifying if you decide to use a pre-existing record as a template. The main format that you'll want to use will be either kit or equipment, which I highlighted in yellow in the title field. Next, you have the main description of the item that I highlighted in blue. If you decide to circulate the item in a case, then you'll want to put the dimensions of the case in subfield C. If the item has additional components or accessories, which is common with a lot of board games, or in this example, the GoPro kit, then you'll want to list those into subfield E. You can usually get a list of components either from the product manual or website. And then you have the summary of the item, which I highlighted in pink. And oftentimes you can find a summary from either Amazon or the product's website. Once your Library of Things collection starts to grow, patrons may want to browse through these items in the online catalog. So our library system decided to add a Library of Things entry in the 500 field, allowing them to search the entire collection, which has been very helpful.
I'm going to cover circulating our Library of Things. So firstly, how do we get the items into patrons' hands, and what are the rules for checkout? All of our Library of Things items circulate for 2 weeks and are non-renew, non-request. To us, this seems to be the perfect amount of time for someone to use the item and to bring it back to the library. If an item is currently available on the shelf and checked in, the patron calls us, and then the item can be set aside for 1 hour or so while the patron drives over to pick it up. There's no request list for our Library of Things items, no wait list. Patrons can belong to any library in the Upper Hudson Library System to borrow from our Library of Things, as long as they drive over to our location and verbally agree to return the items to our location. At checkout time, patrons have to be free from fine levels that would prohibit borrowing, so that's a $5 threshold for our library. And expensive items that we mark with the, there's actually an expensive I type we use. They check out to adult card holders only. That would be devices like the GoPros and the telescopes. Things like board games can go out on a youth card. Items are not able to be borrowed through our self-checkout machines. This means that a clerk reviews the item and its content sheet before it leaves the library in order to check for missing components. Finally, what do we do when it's time to return an item? Patrons are strongly advised to bring the item back to us over the circulation counter for the most accuracy at check-in. Circulation staff will then check for the components of the kits and any pieces or accessories using the content sheet. For the board games, because there are so many pieces and components, we bag the components in U-line bags, and the circulation staff only needs to count the number of bags and not the individual game pieces. If a part goes missing, some items can still circulate, and the circulation staff will place a note on the item record. For example, if one of several GoPro harnesses goes missing, but the GoPro can still be used with its other harnesses, we'll still circulate it. If an item cannot circulate without the missing or damaged part, a decision has to be made on whether to charge the patron or to replace the missing pieces. This all depends on the size and cost of the missing and broken pieces, and it's decided by me in conjunction with our head of circulation or our principal library clerk. Note that for board games, you can often get missing pieces from the companies for free or for cost of shipping. This has been extremely helpful to us, as those are the parts that most frequently go missing. Next, you might want to know, how do we get our collection out on our shelves? How does it look for patrons? Is it cohesive, and do patrons understand what it is? We found ourselves swimming in quite a large collection, and we woke up one day to realize that none of it was packaged, marketed, or handled with consistency. Clerks didn't know what to do at check-in and check-out, and the patrons didn't know what was included with each item. So to make things easier for patrons, not only did we revamp the tags on each item with a consistent logo and label as Heather described, but it was at this time that we also decided each item needed a content sheet with photos and item components that circulation relies upon now so heavily. Creating consistent labeling and thinking about some form of a content sheet with pictures of everything included in the kit is something that I cannot recommend enough for any Library of Things collection. Another thing we did to market the collection was to create subcategories for our items. So we came up with the following: gadgets, cut the cord, home and hobby, kits, games, and museum passes. These subcategories help patrons get a snapshot of all the items that GPL has added to the Library of Things at a glance, and this is how we've got the items listed on our webpage, which you can see here. So, challenges. With any collection, there are, of course, challenges. Our main challenge right now is space. Our library is about to go through a renovation, but we're currently out of space. So we've taken over the shelves near the reference desk to house the Library of Things. It's working for us right now, but it's a little piecemeal. We've taken some shelves out in order to hold our larger lawn games, and the smaller items like our hotspots, cut the cord, are in the bins, which we bought from Target. So it can be use what you have at your disposal. You may be wondering how we've adapted the Library of Things procedures during COVID-19. So as of this presentation, our library will have just opened for in-person browsing. During curbside only services, we did not circulate any Library of Things items. We just didn't have enough staff during the partial closure to handle the items with the care and attention that they need. So with this limited reopening, we'll have more staff. We're able to fill on-demand holds again, and therefore we're gonna resume holding the Library of Things items for an hour or so while patrons drive over to pick them up. One adjustment that we're making, we're actually making our hotspots requestable. They're by far our most popular Library of Thing item, and everyone has an even greater need for internet access during work from home and remote learning. So we've decided the only fair and equitable way to get hotspots into patrons' hands would be to put patrons on a request list. We hope this will prevent people from camping out to get a hotspot and incentivize those late borrowers to return the items. So both of these have been a challenge with circulating the hotspots. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julie DeLaney from the Smithtown Library to talk about their experience with their Library of Things.
Thank you. I am Julie DeLaney, and I am the head of Community Relations Department at the Smithtown Library. The Smithtown Library is the largest public library on Long Island, and we are made up of 4 separate buildings. We do service a district of about 118,000 and currently have about 50,000 library cardholders. Our district is also made up of mostly upper and middle class residents. Our collection and how we handle a lot of the setup is similar to Guilderland's, but we service a much larger population and have 4 buildings in which our collection is housed. So I will focus on our collection a little bit and then what's different from what Guilderland has handled, how Guilderland has handled their collection. Our collection unofficially started with loaning hotspots, and then we added conversion equipment. The reason that we ended up adding our conversion equipment was because we had a conversion set up in one of our buildings. That conversion setup was always booked by patrons. It was our most popular service in that building, and everyone wanted to know if they could do this at home, since it did take quite an amount of time to convert a lot of their VHSs to DVD, cassettes to digital format. So we thought, since our patrons had such interest, why not try and see if we could loan these items out? Since then, the collection has expanded and is made up of over 40 items. We have converters, karaoke machines, party kits, cornhole, kids games, microscopes, and telescopes amongst our collection. The Library of Things was originally handled by our IT department, which was at the time made up of 1 full-timer and 1 part-timer. Since then, we have created a Library of Things committee, and each year the committee decides on what to purchase. All purchases are made at one time. We, like Guilderland, mostly order from Amazon, but have purchased from local shops as well. Decisions about those purchases are made from staff recommendations, patron requests, items we've seen at other libraries, and program ideas. For example, we wanted to have a telescope program at our library, in which it was at the evening outside to look at certain things that would be happening at that time of the year. So we ended up buying telescopes from a local shop. And then we actually had the owner of that local shop come and speak previous to our program about telescopes, about using telescopes, and what are the best telescopes to use. So sometimes local resources are our best resources. To process and catalog the items, once they arrive, they are placed in one central building. It is our Wisconsin building, and they are all processed here so that all items and all pieces end up in the same place. So at that point, someone from the committee does do unpacking of the items, and then it is determined if we need other packaging. Like Guilderland, we have used many things to put our stuff in, rolling cases with styrofoam. Just recently, we bought a regular old suitcase to keep something in. So at that point, then we order the material for packaging. We also have an internal Google Sheet in which the whole committee shares, and in there, all the information about the item is put in there, where we got it from, what is all the pieces that are with it, a link if it was ordered off of Amazon to that website, as well as what each person is responsible for, since there are several people working on each step. So did it get cataloged? Did it get a picture taken of it? Did it get a tag? And all those different things are on the sheet. We do catalog each of our items in Sierra, so they will show up when patrons search for things. All of our items are searchable by keyword, and the entire collection is searchable by typing in Smithtown Library, Library of Things. Each item, and I'm going to say was, because we are no longer doing that, and I will address that going forward, was put in a service called Kit Keeper, and it is also listed on our website. We do have a separate page for the Library of Things. We were using Kit Keeper, a third-party service to also house all of our items and the records. And then as we go forward, I will discuss what we did with Kit Keeper. We did, like Guilderland, put tags and barcodes and the building name on each of our tags. Since we do have 4 buildings and our items can go to the different buildings, we needed to know where that building's home was, we will call it, that in the end, that's where that item ends up. We also, for marketing purposes, put on all of our items, either on the case or on the actual item, a branding that says borrowed from the Smithtown Library and our phone number. This was in hopes that when patrons were using these items, especially some of the party-like items, that maybe their friends, relatives, neighbors would see that they got this item from the Smithtown Library, and they would hope to maybe check out other items or, you know, call us and ask us about the collection, and would help with that at that point. Some of our items also include instructions or has a YouTube channel in which we have some of our videos and how to use the items if we felt that. And each of our items are stored in our reference offices in each of our buildings. So of course, when you are doing your collection, like Guilderland said, space sometimes is always, it can be an issue. We have 4 different buildings and each office is different, and having the space for every item is. And then we also need to decide which building will get each item, and we need to spread out the types of items so that they are on each corner of town. So for circulating our items, we were using Kit Keeper. Like I said, it was a third-party company in which we cataloged all the items. It was used, there is a patron side and a staff side, so it was used to place date-specific holds on the items for which the patrons would like to borrow, but then on the staff side, it was used for checkout and to keep track of where each of the items were, either checked out, at which building, getting ready to go out, it's on its way back and needs to be checked. It was a way of keeping track of everything. For us, each item does go out for 7 days with new renewals. We allow 2 Library of Things items out per card on an adult library card in good standing only. So like Guilderland, no fines, no notes on their card about anything. A waiver does need to be signed by the patron at checkout. I have attached here what it looks like. It does go through loan periods, all the necessary things. And the second side is actually a list of all of the items along with their replacement fees and the overdue fee, which for us is $10 a day for all items. We do have to put, when we were using Kit Keeper, since that was not attached to Sierra, we did have to put the fines on manually into Sierra. So we used to use a separate form in which we would give to circulation to put manual fines on. All of our checkouts and this waiver is handled by our reference staff at the reference desk. So all items are checked out and returned at the reference desk. There are missing items and replacement costs. And at the time that we were using KitKeeper, most of our items would could go to any building. We did have some items that we were not moving to building just due to their size or what was going on. Because by using KitKeeper, not only did you have to tell KitKeeper that the item went out for 7 days, we needed to leave buffered days for transferring between 4 buildings. So we had to leave 3 days in between each checkout for the time allotted if it needed to go to another building. This did hinder things because then that could be a longer amount of time and we would get less circulation when we were using KitKeeper. So from that, we've had some changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have switched from KitKeeper and moved to Sierra as our way. The library opened to the public in July, but we did not start circulating our things right away. We met and said, how can we handle lending out our items during all of this? And it was decided that it would be easier if we would move to Sierra. Sierra is something that all of our staff already had knowledge of and already used for check-in and check-out. The pros to using Sierra was, of course, the ease of checkout, putting fines on people's cards, they were already automatic, and placing holds, since that was something our staff already knew how to do. We've also changed that all items can go to each building for pickup. We don't have any limit on if you are in another building, getting the item sent to you there. Right now, the only con that we have seen from using Sierra is that you cannot choose a date-specific time for your item. So for example, if you're having a party on December 1st and you want the karaoke machine, unfortunately with Sierra, you cannot choose December 1st as your time. You can either try to put it on closer to the date or call on the day of or the day before and see if we have it available. There are no date specific holds at this time. In hopes maybe Sierra might change that one day, but that would be up to Innovative, of course. So since we are circulating items right now, we are still following the same guidelines we are at the books due to COVID-19, and the items are quarantined once they are renewed. We are not checking them in. When they come back, we are checking that all the equipment is there, and then they're going into quarantine. Our library is currently waiving fines for overdues due to this process of quarantining. And then once it comes out of quarantine, we are circulating them. So circulation for items during the pandemic have gone down a little bit just due to time-wise, because for every 7 days that the item is out, it is in quarantine for 7 days. But we do hope that once we are not quarantining with Sierra and no travel time, less travel time in the calendar, we will be able to circulate our items much faster. We have included here as our last 2 slides. One slide will be a list of resources. We also will include this with our conference resources with this video. But here's a list of resources and a link to Guilderland's Library of Things and the Smithtown Library of Things. And then also here is our contact information if you would like to reach out to Kristina, Heather, or myself for any questions that you may have heard during this presentation. I'm now going to turn this over to Steve again, and we're going to start our Q&A portion of our presentation.
Thank you, Julie. We have a number of questions that have been curated from SMART members. And we can put them to the panelists now. First of all, what has been the most difficult item to deal with in your collections, either cataloging wise or logistics wise?
So I'll start this for Guilderland. So what we found to be difficult to manage have been items that come with a lot of parts and pieces. So these would be like your board games and your GoPros. So you might find that oftentimes you need to replace a small part. You also have to count them when they're checking them in and checking them out, so it can take a little bit more time. But luckily, the small parts, they don't cost a lot of money, so they're fairly easy to replace. But just keep in mind, if you are buying things that have a lot of parts, they're just going to be a little more harder to manage than, let's say, maybe like a cake pan where it's only one piece. So just something to keep in mind.
At Smithtown, we've had two difficult items. One, when we first started, was a 8mm reel-to-reel converter. The device was constantly breaking, so every time it came back, we had to fix it, see what was wrong with it. It took it out of circulation for a long time. And then recently, we bought a large paper shredder, thinking this would be a great thing that our patrons would want now. A lot of people cleaned out during the pandemic, but when it came, it just was much larger, I think, than we expected. It also required specific bags to go in it, so we ended up having to purchase a roll of bags so that we could loan one bag per time it's checked out. And then it ended up needing that suitcase I was speaking about. We ended up buying a huge rolling suitcase just to keep it in. It ended up being a little more cumbersome, but that's sometimes online shopping. It's hard to see an item until it comes, but we did make it work. So even when you buy difficult items, like you said, sometimes they work out.
Great, thank you. Has anything been taken out of your collections? And if so, why?
I'll take that for Guilderland. Absolutely. We've taken out several things at this point, but I'll talk about a few of them. One was e-readers. We had these e-readers that were preloaded with titles, and we just found we couldn't keep up with keeping the titles up to date and fresh. Another thing we've taken out is some of the board games. We had some board games already in the library that we started with. Anything that was in good shape, we kind of took it for our initial board game collection, but some of those also were acquired without consideration of the number of pieces. And so we had this game called Small World that had like hundreds and hundreds of little coins. And we were like, this is just not, we tried it for a little while and we're like, this is just not sustainable. It's too many things. Another thing is our 3D glasses. We had these, like you put your phone in a little box and you kind of can do like a 3D game. And really it was at the end of the day, just a plastic box that you put your cell phone in. People weren't interested. So we've taken that out as well.
For Smithtown, initially we had our hotspots in our library of things, and we had taken those out pretty early on because, like I said, with the things with KickKeeper, we were having a hard time getting them circulating often, so those went completely into Sierra with our circulation staff, and they either get put a hold on or they just get them because they're available at the circulation desk. And then we've also removed pieces from some of our items. For one is we have a kids party kit, and in it was a bubble machine. We thought that would have been great and part of the great part of a party, but it just ended up being messy and always coming back wet, and then we'd get everything's wet. So we just felt that we would take the one piece out, but still be able to keep the rest of the party kit going. So sometimes you can just take pieces out and still make something available to circulate.
Great. Bonus follow-up question from the chat. Do you have a standard weeding process for your Library of Things collection?
So ours has been pretty piecemeal. It's kind of, the collection's only a couple years old. Right now, we're mostly going on interest. We've offered things that are not of interest to our patrons to other libraries in our system because a lot of them do have a Library of Things at this point. I think we offered the 3D glasses I referred to, for example, and they were snatched up by the Castleton Library and a couple others. So right now we're going sort of on interest and condition.
We haven't weeded out many things other than getting rid of the items just due to the way that they work with the bubble machine. We have replaced some of the hotspots if they've gotten broken, and then obviously at that point they're unusable to anybody else. But most of the stuff that we've purchased, we've kept in the collection and haven't had to get rid of much or replace much at this time. I do know that there are some other libraries on Long Island that when they're missing pieces, they'll try to 3D print them so they don't have to get rid of the full item. So at this point, we're trying to hold on to everything. A lot of this stuff is expensive, so we'd like to see it stick around for as long as it can.
Great, thank you. Following up on some of these things being expensive, Do you require a deposit when something from this collection is borrowed?
We don't. Guilderland does not. Our loss rate has not been such that we've felt we needed to institute that for our community.
We don't take a deposit either, but as I stated, a waiver is signed, just letting people know what are the replacement costs if they lose the item and what is the fine. This way we feel they're fully aware at that point that they need to return the item or it'd be considered a lost item.
See, Kristina just mentioned that the loss rate at Guilderland is not bad at all. Do you find the same thing in Smithtown, Julie?
Yeah, we have not really lost anything. Most people have returned everything. And I will say when we reopened after the pandemic, after being closed, and we were starting to accept material, we didn't take our Library of Things material back right away. We wanted to handle all the books, but we had a lot of people call and want to return the items. I think they were afraid of having them out for a long period of time. They didn't want to lose it. They don't want to get charged for it. So we had a lot of people reach out to us wanting to get the items back. So I think due to the nature of the cost, so far it's been good because people know that losing the item or not returning it could place a hefty fine on their card.
I will point out for Guilderland, we find that items that have a lot of pieces, so going back to like your board games and GoPros, we do find that sometimes patrons don't return like the chargers or the cords, the batteries, stuff like that. So while we don't see a lot of loss in like big items that are expensive, we do see some loss in items that are smaller. But again, luckily it's usually not a big deal to replace them. But we do see some loss with that kind of stuff.
All right. What was the most surprising thing you learned during the process of either setting up or implementing your Library of Things?
So I'll start for Guilderland. I think the most surprising thing was how much you need to think about when you're developing a Library of Things collection. So for instance, you need to think about the space, you need to think about how patrons are going to use the items, you have to think about how they're going to be packaged. So it's a little more involved than, let's say, putting together a book collection. But with that said, I think having a Library of Things collection is really rewarding, and I think the patrons really appreciate it.
I would say the most surprising thing along with my committee, has learned is how much work it is to upkeep. Obviously, we were using Kit Keeper and putting that all in there and keeping track. There were probably 6 or 7 steps every time an item was checked out, checked in. We had to go through all the steps before the item could even be put on hold for somebody else or move forward. So there was a lot of upkeep. And I still think there's upkeep even though we went to Sierra. We just had an item that we purchased. It takes batteries. And we lent it out and then decided that maybe we should be using rechargeable batteries. So now when items are returned, the batteries are getting charged before going to the next patron. So it is sometimes a little bit of upkeep. But if you think it through, like Heather said, and you kind of come up with a procedure, you end up being able to make it work. But that was surprising, not to think that I thought this was going to be easy or any of the committee thought it was easy. But as you keep buying different things, I think some of the upkeep does become a little much until you figure out how to actually get it to work, and then it gets easier. I don't want to turn anyone off, but you have to just know that some of the upkeep for items can be a little bit more than others. Obviously, if you're having like Guilderland, the cake pans, maybe not so much upkeep, but something with batteries or cords or lots of pieces will require some upkeep every time it's checked in and checked out.
Very good. To that end, another bonus question that came up through the chat. Did either of your libraries get pushback from circulation staff after having to manage the checkout and return of these unusual items?
It's a good question. I think the clerks at the clerk level were a little scared. It is a lot. Like Julie said, we don't want to discourage, but to be realistic, it is a lot of things to consider. But our head of circulation and our principal library clerk are very enthusiastic to try new things. And they're also constantly sort of innovating circulation itself. So they were fully on board. They got the staff on board. So I think if you can get an ally in the Circ department, that helps a lot. It goes a long way.
Since most of our stuff is handled at the reference desk at first, Circulation obviously was very okay with our library of things. Once we moved the hotspots, obviously it took a little bit of transition because there's a form to fill out. You know, there are a few extra steps different than circulating just the regular items. They have to check things off when they come back in. And then when we switched from KitKeeper to Sierra, there was not a pushback, but another learning period, because now when they run their slips for pickups, our library of things items come there. So we actually came up with putting something in the call number for all of our library things items. They say LOT. So that way, as soon as that comes up on a paging slip for the circulation department, when they run for regular material, they know right away that goes over to our reference department, and then they handle the rest. So it just took a little bit of working with and figuring out the circulation staff what would be the best way for them to know that these items really go to the reference desk. And I think they've kind of, we got it. And then also, obviously, when people come in to pick up, they're so used to going straight to the circulation desk that then they have to remind them that, those items go to the reference desk. But like Kristina said, getting everyone on board and excited about it has, of course, helped.
Great. What are your most popular and least popular circulating things?
So I'll answer that for Guilderland. Definitely our Wi-Fi hotspots and our folding tables are really popular. We once had a lady stand outside the library for 2 hours to get a Wi-Fi hotspot. So we can't keep them on the shelf. They're very, very popular. The folding tables, a lot of people use them for graduation parties, for garage sales. So we find that they're constantly being checked out. And I'll also note our GoPros are also very popular. I think it's one of those items where people want to use it, but they don't want to buy it because it has a high price tag. So our GoPros, they go out a lot. The thing that doesn't really circulate well is our cake pans. Surprisingly, we're not really sure why. It could be because people already have cake pans at their house that they're already using. But luckily, the cake pans are not a lot of money. They're easy to maintain. So, you can always try them at your library. They might work. And if they don't, then you don't have much, money invested into them.
At the Smithtown Library, our most popular item is our VHS to DVD conversion equipment. That's how we started our main library of things, and it's still our most popular. It's always out, always has a list of holds on it, because it is equipment that takes time for you to use for the conversion. As long as your VHS is as long as you have to run it. It doesn't quickly record. So if you want an hour and a half VHS, it has to run for an hour and a half. So I think many people like to do it at home because they can put it in, walk away from it, and then come back. Obviously, we still have the equipment at the library, but that does require someone to stay at the computer for the full time. So that's been the most popular to take home. We have a couple of them and they're always out. I will tell you, I have it on hold and I still haven't gotten it. So perks of working in the library don't help. It's just a lot of people are looking. And then our least popular actually is the slide negative converter. So when we had started adding these converters and become very popular, we added a cassette converter and all these different reel-to-reel converter, thinking people wanted to convert all of their items. But our slide negative converter really hasn't been that popular. I think it's just not. Slides aren't as obviously many people don't have slides, but also it's just not as easy to use. As we all know, slides are difficult to use. Slides are very fragile, and it's just one of those items that barely goes out. We still have kept it in the collection, but it's definitely got our lowest circ numbers.
All right. What would you say is the most important lesson you have learned throughout the process?
So you're going to answer that?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Just to be flexible and to get creative. So the example I was going to use is that we had a giant outdoor Jenga and the bag broke. And so we're now looking at, okay, what do we put it in? And so we decided to get this padded cooler on Amazon that was like a rectangle shape. and it actually came in a 2-pack. So we're like, all right, seems like it'll fit the Jenga. And at the same time, we were buying a karaoke machine. And we're like, hey, the second bag in this 2-pack will fit the karaoke machine. So we've now got a giant Jenga and a karaoke machine in a grocery freezer bag from Amazon. So just really like get creative and be flexible. And Heather, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, just kind of what Kristina said. Like, I think in the beginning, when you're starting out, it's just going to be a lot of trial and error. So you might find that, like us, that you're repackaging things, you're changing your space, you might be changing your loan periods. So I think, you know, just don't be afraid to just try different things. And then I think after a while, once you have the collection long enough, you'll find what works for your library.
I would agree. Being flexible, you have to change all sorts of things like packaging, like I discussed about the batteries, having to now have rechargeable batteries. For us, you know, the loan process, we completely changed because we found that the other one just wasn't working enough for us. We have 4 buildings, so we're constantly moving items from building to building. For a while, we were using our system deliveries to do our deliveries. We didn't have an internal delivery person. So that was part of the consideration of what items we would move and would not, because we did not want to put that on somebody if we weren't happy with the packaging, or would it get broken, or would we lose a piece. Our telescope comes in 2 different a box and a bag because of all the pieces. We actually now have internal drivers that help drive the decision to go to Sierra and be able to interloan everything between our 4 buildings much easy. So you just have to be flexible, and as staff changes in your library or pandemic hits, you never know what will change and how you are handling it. It's no like, well, this is the way we've always done it. You know, it just is going to be one of those things that you're constantly changing, and it will also change based on the items you buy, or items people request, or items that have too many pieces, or you know, all of the things we discussed, I think. And even when you're doing this a few years, since I think both of the libraries have been doing this a few years, it's still going to be different every time. Or the item that you purchase, you know, it's flexible each time the items come in, and you think you bought the right case and you didn't, and you buy another one. Luckily, we're librarians or library staff that is kind of okay with being flexible and changing things. And then those things you purchased that you ended up not using, we always find other ways to use in the library. I don't find that libraries let anything go to waste. So if Kristina's bag didn't work when they bought the cooler bag, they'd find something else to utilize it for. And some things are expensive, and so you know, it's hard to buy those things. You know, we spent over $100 on a suitcase just to put a shredder in, but we know that our patrons will take it out. We know it's going to get use, and we know it will help. And you know, hopefully that, you know, works out for us, and then we go and build on that. So you're just constantly being flexible each time.
Very good. And one more, you both mentioned, or you all mentioned, that a lot of your collections are built based on suggestions from patrons and staff members. Have there been any suggestions for items to add that once you started researching it and realized that it just wasn't going to work?
Yeah, for Guilderland, we've taken some patron suggestions, and others we've felt we haven't been able to fulfill. We had one patron keeps asking for this highly specialized equipment that kind of works with his college program that he's in, but you know, you look it up and it's just kind of like so specific that you're thinking, would anybody else really use this? And that's a decision factor. For that, we decided no, it's too, and I wish I remembered the name of the device, but it was too hyper specific to his needs. It wouldn't really appeal to a wide audience. Another thing we considered pre-COVID was a tent. We had a lady who was willing to donate the tent. She was in front of us. She's like, I, you know, never opened it, want to give it to you. We're not going to use it. And we had to think about that, and we rejected it because we couldn't come to an agreement on how to package it at that time, how to clean it, and sort of adding a new layer to, or amping up this Library of Things collection, this question of like, do we really want to circulate an item that people are going to sleep and maybe eat in? So at that time we rejected the tent. So things like that, you know, when you think of all the questions we've talked about so far, how it's going to circulate, what its use is going to be like when the patrons have it, how it's going to be packaged, how it's going to come back, and who's going to clean the item are big considerations.
We've gotten a few suggestions for things and rejected them. Majority come for us through what is the liability to the library. Someone requested a drone, and we felt that since many things have happened with drones, not to say that the person who requested was going to do anything bad, but there are bad things and people who have done interesting things, and what are the rules? What are the rules of where it can fly and where it can fly over? We felt that we would be way too liable for that. We've had people ask for things like ladders, stud finders, things to do home improvement. And right now we've held off because we're not 100% sure what our liability would be. What if they fell off the ladder? What if the stud finder didn't work and they put a hole in their wall? Those are kind of the things. I know Guilderland has loaned cake pans, but we've sort of been asked not to loan food type items, I guess you would call them. What's the liability if something was left behind on the food and the next as much as we tried to clean it and the next person's allergic to it, there's been that kind of question as well. So the things that we have kind of rejected have all put that liability question. What is the library's responsibility once we let this item out? And not that we don't have liability when books are checked out and what happens with that, but these items are obviously unconventional items when we all first started a library, libraries. So that's kind of where we're at, and we still continue to ask those questions, as items get requested. It's not that we would never go back to those items, but as things evolve and policies evolve and other libraries are doing things and insurance involves, we will continue to ask that. But most items we reject end up being because of a liability. What's the response and our responsibility, for the library as well.
All right. All I've got left is there anything else that's popped into your minds while we've been talking about this topic that you'd like to add in?
Just be flexible and get creative. And I think you can start with the smallest thing or something large. You can start with something expensive or more affordable. Really, you'll be surprised at the things that people want from the library or that will check out.
My advice would be to listen to your neighbors, even if you don't live in your own district of library, just listen to what people are saying. I really wish I had a GoPro, but I want to try it out before I buy it. Or, I want to just take something on a trip once, but I really don't want to spend that $150. That's some great places to start with a collection, because you're in hopes that if your neighbor thinks that the other people in the district think that. And then once they find out, oh, I can only take this out once from the library, and I don't have to spend all of this money on it. We recently purchased a paper shredder. I think a lot of people don't want to spend. We bought an industrial one where they'll be able to shred their stuff rather quickly, and then they don't have to, spend a couple $100. They can just take it out from the library. So just listen to what you hear or just around town.
All right, great. Thank you very much for your excellent lending of your expertise and insight into this new and fascinating topic.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was such a wonderful program. This concludes the NYLA 2020 on-demand program, Building a Library of Things. We hope you continue to take advantage of all the on-demand and live programs the NYLA 2020 annual virtual conference has to offer. Thank you for helping us make this the best virtual conference ever. Thanks, everyone.